Yes, it is. Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out on such a lovely, lovely evening when you could be out making snowmen. It's the first snow of the year. Absolutely. Well, I'm Ruben Cash. I'm the environmental coordinator here at Skagway Traditional Council. We're here to talk about the Skagway Beach Program, right? And this is a partnership between Skagway Traditional Council, the Department of Environmental Conservation, the municipality of Skagway. It's all funded by the Environmental Protection Agency. We want to thank the municipality for allowing us access on the uplands to get to our beaches all summer long. And also in person here with us is our program assistant, Mr. Colton Belisle. And we have a new employee with STC this year. This is Eric Dye. He's our environmental specialist. And these two guys are really the heroes of the beach program. They did the bulk of the work. They were out there in the waves and like getting wet and splashed and running from beach to beach all summer long. They really put in a lot of good effort and like really well done to these two guys. Let's give them a round of applause. Also on the line with us here is our project manager, Gretchen Augat. Gretchen, you want to say hi to everybody?
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here.
And Gretchen's been really instrumental in getting this whole thing off the ground. I've been talking with her since 2020 about the beach program and wanting to get Skagway on the list. She's helped us write the quality assurance project plans, get the work plans together. Just really has been a fantastic resource in us getting this program launched for its inaugural season. So we are recording the session, as I said, so, and it doesn't look like we have anybody else on Zoom, but Gretchen, if you don't want your photo to appear on the recording, you can just mute your video if you want, I suppose. And I guess we don't really need to talk about any other Zoom housekeeping since we don't have a big Zoom population. So let's just roll right into it. Myself, I like to have a roadmap everywhere that I go. So this is the torture that we are going to be subjecting you guys to over the next 20 or 30 minutes. We're going to go over the background of the beach program. We're going to talk about, and this should say potential bacteria sources. We're going to do a site overview, talk about the different beaches that we went to. We're going to talk about what are we sampling. We're going to talk about our collection methods and some of the water quality criteria that we're comparing our results to. Then we'll move on to talk about communications, because talking to you guys about what's happening on our beaches is really a critical part of this whole program. So timely communication of our results and any sort of exceedances is very important. And then we're going to have some fun and look at some photos from the 2023 field season. We'll go over the results and then we'll have a chance for everybody to ask questions. Everybody on board? Sound good? All right, let's just power right on through. When I think of a beach, at least I think when most people think of a beach, you're going to think of something like that, right? That looks nice. I'm sorry to do this to you tonight because I know this is probably the worst time to see a beautiful sunny beach where it's, I'd say in the low 70s. Beautiful place to go beach combing. You know, you can be out on a boat, you can go swimming, you can snorkel, you can do all sorts of stuff, right? It's a place for recreation. I'm from the state of Washington. Right, and us northern Pacific dwellers think of beaches a little bit more like this. Not quite as appealing, but this is where we would travel from the Salish Sea, where it's all the big inland sea. We would go to the coast, to the beach, right, where we get these big Pacific waves. Still good opportunities to do any kind of recreating that you need to do. Here in the Upper Taya, though, we think of beaches a little bit differently, right? So that's a beach, right? You gotta kind of take what you can get, but it's still access to the water, right? This is still the way that we're able to interact with that intertidal zone. It's a place where we can get food. It's a place where we can go and recreate. You guys all beach enthusiasts here? Oh, and what are some beach activities that we like to do at Skagway?
I just walk down to the water.
Walk down to the water, right? Yeah.
I used to go in the water with Sharon.
Oh yeah, you were part of the mermaids.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I wanted to join you guys so bad. It sounded like so much fun, and I've got a dry suit and everything.
Look for water birds.
Look for water birds, right? Yeah, there's a lot of folks that are going down to the shoreline so that they can do some bird watching, because we do have a wonderful little shoulder season in the spring and the fall, and we have all these flyover migratory birds coming through. It's really, really fun to go do that. I like to kayak, right?
I'm working on an assembly from the sea, so I'm always picking up rocks and glass, shells.
Right.
If I can't find something on Long Bay Beach or my beach, I think it's a wasted trip. I've always got something in my hands. Driftwood,
Yeah.
good driftwood.
Absolutely. Yeah, beachcombing. Beachcombing is a great activity. I love going down there. What do you guys like doing at the beach?
Finding little weird critters.
Finding critters, right? Yeah, going around in the tide pools. Oh, yeah, baby shrimps. Colton's an expert in finding the little eels. He finds eels all the time. They're all there at Naku Bay.
You find eels spot?
Yeah, yeah, down in Naku.
It was very, very rare.
That's interesting. That's it. I want to talk to you sometime about the changes that you've seen over the years, because I think that should be
Probably be a
documented.
good idea.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, lots of different activities that we can do, even though it's not your classic beach, right? Even though we're not going out there in our bathing suits, we're still down at the water, we're still recreating, we're still coming in contact with the water. So it's important for us to understand what's in the water so that we can enjoy those beaches safely. So I'm gonna bring our program specialist, Mr. Eric Dye, up here to talk about the history of the beach program.
When we choose recreational beach activities that involve contact with water, like you see Ruben up there kayaking in Naku Bay, we run the risk of exposure with pathogens if there's contamination present from human or animal waste. And that's right, we're talking about something our salmon in the classroom students love giggling about: food. Fecal pollution can harbor disease-causing microbes such as bacteria, viruses, and protozoa. And the EPA has determined that bacteria is responsible for much of the coastal water quality impairments seen nationwide. Ailments caused by these pathogens from fecal contamination can include gastrointestinal and respiratory illnesses, skin rashes, and eye, ear, and wound infections. Recognizing this hazard, Congress passed the Beaches Environmental Assessment and Coastal Health, or BEACH, Act in 2000. Acronyms don't usually work out that way, but it's pretty nice there. It's an amendment to the well-known Clean Water Act, which directed states, tribes, and territories with coastal recreational waters to review and update water quality criteria, and enabled the EPA to distribute grant funds to states and tribes for establishing monitoring programs to assess water quality at recreational beaches. In our neck of the woods, DEC developed the Alaska Beach Program, which has been implemented in numerous communities across the state. We didn't have a map of all the towns and communities, but I'm just gonna name them off for you. It's Anchorage, Dillingham, Douglas Island, Haines, Homer, Hoona, Juneau, Casilla, Kenai, Ketchikan, King Salmon, Naknek, Nome, Petersburg, and Wrangell. They have all participated in the beach monitoring programs, and this year, Kodiak and Skagway entered the fold. DEC has streamlined the process of assessing beaches and developing and implementing these programs by establishing beach survey and ranking protocols, a program handbook, which much of this information from this presentation is coming from, a quality assistance assurance project plan, or QAP template, to guide us with our on-ground efforts, and a general communication plan for reporting these conditions to the public. The goal of the beach program is to protect recreational beach users, so communication is the most key. STC began the application process for this in 2020, beginning with an initial survey of recreational beaches that identified potential bacteria sources and the degree of use by the public. It makes sense then to talk about some of the potential sources of this fecal bacteria. Here you see a map of Skagway. And one of the most obvious potential sources falls under the general category of point sources. And a point source is where the source of pollution can be identified. Wastewater treatment facility outfalls would be this one that falls under a point source. In Skagway, we have a municipal wastewater treatment facility outfall and diffuser, which injects treated effluent into marine waters off the end of the state ferry dock, about 410 feet off the shore and 55 feet below the mean lower low water line. And the Skagway wastewater treatment facility outfall incorporates what you see here in this pinkish purple color as a mixing zone. And a mixing zone, if you didn't know, is the defined portion of a water body where a permitted wastewater discharge undergoes its initial dilution. This mixing zone extends in a 1,600-meter radius around the center of the outfall and diffuser. Here, the marine water quality standards for fecal coliform are allowed to be exceeded. We also have wastewater treatment facilities on cruise ships that dock at the waterfront. And while all the ships, not all the ships discharge wastewater while in port here, there are a number that have permits that allow this. It's also good to note that the cruise ship's water treatment facility discharges are held to higher water quality standards when they do discharge.
Higher than Skagway.
Another area would be the small boats in Small Boat Harbor as another potential source. Another would be all the stormwater outfalls that they might be contributing to fecal pollution as well. As water is channeled from streets and other impervious sources in town into the stormwater pipes that discharge into the Skagway River and Pullen Creek. And here with a better depiction of this. This was mapped out by the Taya Inlet Watershed Council several years ago, and all these red dots you see are all catch basins or storm drains throughout the town, and the yellow dots are the same outfalls that you saw on the last slide. As water travels overland, it could pick up animal feces and other pollutants on its way down. And while outfalls are certainly an identifiable source, the effluent discharge that comes from numerous points within the watershed. So it's not this is a non-point source instead of a point source. Another potential source would be septic systems of fecal contaminations if they're not functioning properly. This map has a big caveat. The data points shown here are associated with private parcels containing a structure as identified through satellite imagery analysis. We were unable to obtain an actual database showing permitted septic systems in Skagway, but this gives you a good idea of the potential number of systems outside of public works service area. Finally, we have lots of little critters, both wild and domestic, doing their business on the beaches and riverbanks and potentially contributing to the fecal contamination. They are also proven.
Yes, they don't poop.
But it's and their poop is pristine.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have anything.
With these potential sources in mind, let's take a look at the recreational beaches that we sampled at during the program and which sources might be influencing them. We'll start over at Small Boat Harbor on the right. The kayakers, paddle boarders, and dog walkers have all been seen using the public boat launch area in Small Boat Harbor, which is close to the influence of the small boats there, cruise ships, and the wastewater treatment facility outfall and wildlife are all sources of potential sources of contamination there. To the left of that, airport is what we call Airport Beach. The beach, it's adjacent to the Orr Peninsula, also used by water sports enthusiasts, dog walkers, and beach combers. Potential sources include the mixing zone of the wastewater treatment facilities, stormwater outfalls at the end of the runway, septic systems up on the hill, and cruise ships, discharges, and wildlife. The one to the left of that is what we call Yakutania West. It's just to the west of Yakutania Point. a great place to walk your dog, launch or land a paddleboard, even take a dip. We've seen people in the water there. Or collect beach treasures, have a picnic. They have a nice picnic table there. Here we are still within the mixing zone, just barely. And downstream of septic systems and under the influence of wildlife leavings. A little bit northwest of that is Smuggler's Cove. Another place a great place for kayaking, paddleboards, spot to throw your stick in the water for your dogs. Chance to forage for mussels. Oops. And even if you wanted to take a dip in the water, we've also seen people swimming in there. Septic systems and wildlife are the main potential sources of contamination here. And then last but not least, all the way up top there, Naku Bay. This is a local favor, probably the closest approximation of the classic notion of a beach here in Skagway. I'm sure you all know this, but where a lot of people like to catch the waves, walk their dogs, have beach combers and even swimmers there too. Like Smuggler's Coves, septic systems and wildlife are potential sources of contamination here. And now I'm gonna hand it off to Colton. He could talk what we're actually, or
Just real quick, just because I'm interested, because we have folks that have lived here forever and ever. The wastewater outfall in that mixing zone, how many of you knew about the mixing zone down at the harbor? So this would be the first time that you've heard of that. Oh, Sarah knows, yeah.
I
Sarah.
never contacted Ron about it.
I have one, I didn't.
Yeah,
I just look at it. and-
Yeah, I wondered, but didn't know.
yeah, okay, no, that's good to know. I kind of want to do a survey and find out what public knowledge is on that
Good
mixing
idea.
zone, because I think that's important public knowledge for folks, so
I'm
cool.
gonna ask a couple other people that I know
Yeah,
that got sidetracked. They should be here tonight.
all right, thank you.
Back to your regularly scheduled program. So with our beaches identified, going over to the actual sampling portion of what we were doing. The goal of the beach program was to monitor for fecal contamination. So what we're sampling for is, we're looking for fecal coliform and enterococci. And while those are the two main things we're looking for, there's all sorts of different pathogenic bacteria, viruses, protozoa. And the reason we're only focusing on these two is that there's specific tests for each and every one. They all have their own tests that we would have to do for them. So these two have the most, these are fecal indicator bacteria. They're present in warm-blooded animal digestive tract, so they're most common in the poop of all the animals that would frequent these beaches, including birds, dogs, and people. And between these two, they are the easiest to kind of target, and they're the most likely to be the causes of these illnesses that can affect humans the most. So the first one we're looking at is the Enterococcus. This is identified by the EPA as the most efficient surrogate for water quality status. This bacterium is used to determine when water quality exceeds the set benchmarks for contact recreation. And then our second one we're looking at is the fecal coliforms. And we use fecal coliforms to determine whether or not recreational waters are unsuitable for the consumption of raw aquatic life. And then, so our sampling began May 23rd, and then it went once a week until late September. And we collected samples, and we would have everything gloved up, everything single use, and just very sanitary procedures. We don't want to try. The rest of our ability is we're trying to keep ourselves out of these samples that we're collecting. So the biggest challenge we had was from the second we collected our first sample of the day, we had 6 hours to get all the samples collected, all the samples bottled, and everything sent down to the lab in Juneau. So, and besides that 6 hour holding time they also had a temperature hold, so they had to stay between 1 and 10 degrees Celsius. So we would prep a cooler the night before, and then everything would get stored in the cooler as we went, and then everything would get sealed within the cooler at the end when we dropped them off at seaplanes, and they would take their flight down to Juneau. So all 5 beaches previously described, we would go through, we would collect a sample each one for both fecal coliform and enterococci. And then once a week, we would have a duplicate sample that would rotate. So like 1 week we would take our normal sample at Long Bay and a duplicate sample from Long Bay. And then the next week, it would just be the 1 sample at Long Bay and then another sample at Boat Harbor and then a duplicate at Boat Harbor. So every week we would take a sample from each location, and then once a week we would have a second rotating sample that would just be used as a sanitation check to ensure everything's going good. Also at each site we would conduct a beach survey. For the beach survey, we will be looking at air temperature. We would take note of how many boats were in the area, how many dogs were in the area, if we saw people in the water or just people on the beach. Just kind of environmental checks. We would take note of the wind and temperature, and then also precipitation in the past couple of days, things that might influence any bacteria at the beach or anything that might improve or decline that measure. And then as far as in the water go, we would collect water temperature, turbidity, cloudiness of the water, pH, salinity, and dissolved oxygen. So the weekly samples went from May through September. We'll be doing this again next year, and everything gets flown down to Juneau where it gets analyzed by Admiralty Environmental. And they process and analyze using EPA methods to determine bacteria concentrates. Additionally, at the end of the season, we collected a additional sample to perform microbial source tracing, which allows us to differentiate between the types of warm-blooded animals contributing to fecal contamination. So we can see like what specifically is pooping on our beaches. Now I will pass it back to Ruben to go over water quality criteria.
Get ready for the torture, guys. Because guess what's coming up? It is absolutely math time, all right? So we gotta have something to compare results to, right? It's meaningless numbers unless we have criteria that we can say, okay, this is where we should be, this is over, this is less than. So we're gonna be using 2 different criteria for the 2 different types of bacterium that we are collecting, right? One is going to be a measure of 10% of the samples collected at each site, right? And the other measure is the geometric mean over either 30 days for enterococci or over the full season for the fecal coliform, right? Now the first one's pretty straightforward, 10% of the samples. So if we collect 10 samples, that'd be 1 sample. So if 1 sample goes over the criteria, then that is the water quality fails at that site, right? Now the geometric mean, that's a little bit of a different beast, right? I like to tell people that I make a mean hot fudge sundae. And what I mean is that I make a really, really average hot fudge sundae. It's not that good, it's not that bad. Easy to understand, right? That's the arithmetic mean. You take and you add up all what you have and you divide it by however many you have, okay? Well, that's great, but the arithmetic mean doesn't really do that well when you have numbers that are all over the place, that go away from that central tendency. When you have numbers that are really, really low, really, really high above that central tendency, you're not really getting a good average. And this comes into play when you're calculating ratios or compound interest, or when you're studying bacteria, which can go from 10 to 10,000 fold between samples, right? So you really need a more robust way to find that central tendency in your data set. And so that's why we plug in all this stuff here. So before you guys leave, I'm gonna give you guys a set of numbers and don't use your calculators. I want you to do all in your head. We're locking the doors until you guys figure this. I'm just kidding. I love scaring people with math. It's hilarious. So with that, now we're gonna look at the state standards. We're looking at two different things, right? Enterococci is one of those fecal indicator bacteria, right? It's not necessarily causing the disease, but it can indicate whether or not there are pathogens in the water. And that we're looking at the enterococci for contact recreation. Think like you're jumping in the water, you're pulling up a piece of driftwood that you just can't wait for it to get up to the rack line. And I gotta get it out. Anytime you're getting water on you, that's contact recreation. So for contact recreation, we've got this this geometric mean, right? And this is in a 30-day period. So you have to have if we're doing weekly, you have to have 4 weeks in a row in order to be able to calculate that geometric mean. That's important for the calculation. And so that benchmark is 35 enterococci CFUs. Those are colony forming units. So basically they take the sample and they filter it out and they incubate it, and little colonies start to grow on it. So they're counting the colonies that are growing, little splotches of bacteria colonies. Right, so 35 of those per 100 milliliter, and that's basically just so that they understand the volume where it comes from. And then the 10% of the samples is at 130 CFUs per 100 milliliter, right? The other thing that we're looking at, the fecal coliforms, another one of those indicator bacteria that's a surrogate for being able to tell whether there's pathogens. We're looking at harvesting for the consumption of raw mollusks. Anybody like oysters? Nobody likes oysters. I'm a fan of oysters. I really like oysters. I really like sushi. I do enjoy eating some raw food out of the ocean when I can. And other people do too. And think about the amount of folks that we've got coming here every summer from cultures all over the world. Whereas me as a Westerner, I might walk up to an apple tree as long as I know I'm not stealing from someone. And I wouldn't think twice about plucking an apple from a tree and having a bite, right? It's just second nature to me because I like to do that. There are cultures that visit Skagway every single year where they might not think twice about it. They see a beautiful bed of mussels out there and they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna grab one of those and shuck it and eat it because that's a normal thing to do, right? So it is the most stringent criteria that we're comparing to. So the geometric mean, and this is over the full season. We're not just looking at that 30-day period. We take all of our results from all the different weeks that we go out there. That can't exceed 14 fecal coliform against the CFUs per 100 milliliters. So comparing that to the 35, right, it's much more stringent. And then for that 10%, I do believe we are doing membrane filtration tests. So we're looking at 31 CFUs per 100 milliliters, right? And I think that brings us to 2023 field season. You wanna come on back up?
Yeah.
Hello again.
This is been
Oh, no, I need to talk about communication. What am I doing? What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do if we get an exceedance? Help practice your presentations, right? So we've emphasized it's important for us to get this out there. And so DEC and SDC work together to come up with a communication plan. And that includes, we have the lab do rush reporting for us. So if enterococci goes over that benchmark, they will let us know as soon as that analysis is done. They send us out a notification, and then we know like very quickly after that exceedance has happened. So then there will be posts on the DEC website. We'll do social media blasts here from Skagway. We have an email listserv. I know a couple of you are on the listserv. As that, yeah. If anybody wants to get on the listserv, it's great. It's whether or not there's exceedances, a message will go out weekly, basically saying, hey, no exceedances were found this week, or the opposite if we happen to. I did talk to the radio station and they said that they would be absolutely willing to help us out with radio announcements if we do have an exceedance, which I think will help to reach a larger demographic. And then we wouldn't close a beach, but we would talk to the municipality about posting an advisory for a beach if that exceedance was hit at any one of our beaches. So communication is important for sure. I want to just really quick show you guys these websites because they're really fantastic. I put QR codes up there if anybody wants to like snap a picture of it, but it's okay. this will be recorded, and we also have, we'll have these links on our social media and all. We'll get you the links if you want them, but let's check out the DEC main splash page here. And it basically just goes over, a description of the program, talks about how you can get involved, contact for the main folks involved, who's involved in the sampling. And it's got this great bank of resources right here, all the press releases, the beach grant actual page. There's a virtual beach, which I'm hoping Gretchen will give us a rundown on, and some handbooks and stuff like that. And then, as Eric said, this year, Kodiak and Skagway are in there. So Skagway's got its own little page right here. So you can just click on that number and this beautiful GIS map shows up. And I believe what will happen if any exceedance happens, you see the dots where our sample beaches are. If any exceedance occurs, that dot will change color and it will shine at you and say, this beach is hot this week. We've also got a really great resource, the Skagway Beach Frequently Asked Questions brochure. Just talks about some frequently asked questions and all the good answers to that. We have our quality assurance project plan up there. So if anybody wants to check our work, make sure that we're doing things according to how we said we were going to do it. It makes these data legal and defensible. And that's really important, because if there were a lot of exceedances, we would want to start moving towards some regulatory actions, right? So we need to have data that can be defended. We need to know that our data is good and collected in the most stringent way. And then we also have a link to the Skagway Beach Handbook, a fantastic resource, goes over all the stuff we're talking about today, covers the sites, and also talks about the communication plan. So really good group of resources right here. If you're not on the listserv and you want to be on it, talk to me at the end of this talk and we'll get you on there. Just really a whole lot of good stuff on here. Okay, and now I really mean it. Now, let's bring up Colton to talk about our 2023 season.
All right. So, looking back at our field season, we can look at a couple different things, a couple challenges, and a couple of things we ran into. So, our first sample, our first challenge, I mean, is the weather, our time constraints we faced, getting everything dropped off in time, and how we have just the airport beach as a site is a challenge. And then looking at some of our local wildlife friends we made throughout the season. So the least surprising challenge we dealt with here in the Windy Valley was wind. Surprisingly though, this was only really a problem the first couple of weeks. The first couple of weeks, as you can see here at Airport Beach, we had heavy wind the first couple of visits there. We had giant waves we were dealing with, wind so bad we had to just get our samples and retreat back to the truck to get everything labeled and sealed away, because everything was just blowing away down on the waterfront. There's no cover down there. It's right there on the ocean. We have helicopters overhead, because we're right down the hill from Kemsko. And then since we were running off of our Alaska seaplane drop-off times and not whether or not it was low or high tide, sometimes it was low tide, sometimes it was high tide. And then since we aren't going out based on that, a lot of the time we have to find ways across the channel there, across the Skagway River, try to find new paths where we're not going through the deep, fast running parts of that. And then moving more on to just our challenges at the airport beach is a lot of scurrying, a lot of fighting the waves. But the airport beach also had a lot of other things there that we kind of pay attention to. It had a lot of bird life on the waterfront. We had between here and Long Bay, we had a lot of checkups on the salmon run that was happening. There was a lot of salmon that we were seeing while taking the samples. We were being in the water 10 minutes at a time. We would be in there for 5 minutes to let our water reading stabilize. At the end of that 5 minutes, we would take our first set of samples. And then another 5 minutes, we would take another water reading and get out at that point. But during those 10 minutes at these two sites, we would have a lot of salmon weaving between our feet, and then salmon on the beach, and a lot of eagles and seagulls in these sites. So we were able to note down and watch. And then more in our wildlife, we had a lot of friends we made at some of these sites. Since we were going out regularly we would show up at 6:30, get everything ready, head out at 7 to all these different sites. And then since we were going out kind of before everyone else, a lot of the time we would start at Long Bay. So a lot of our time going out early towards in that direction, we would run into the fox family at the lookout. So we saw them a lot. We kind of got used to, they would be our first say hi to the fox family on our way out. And then out of the point, we had a couple friendly squirrels who would always come up and sit with us on the picnic table and take notes. And then we had the odd couple. We had an otter one day at a small boat harbor. There were a heron one time at the small boat harbor. And then just seeing our salmon runs at the couple different sites. And then earlier I mentioned our end of the season special sample that we took. So looking at the void here, this is that special sample. This sample was in September, so we were out of the summer flight schedule by this point. Summer flight schedule, our drop-off time was 10:45 to get everything to the airport by. At this point, this was the fall schedule, and it was not just going to Juneau, it was going to Maryland. So we started this day at 3:30 a.m. So we have here our beautiful void pictures of being nice and early. So we had everything ready to go by, when was this already? 6:30 we had, 6:37 we had all our samples taken, ready to go out. But we had connection issues getting to Juneau, getting to FedEx on time. And I will let Ruben recount his side of that fateful day and getting
that fateful day.
and getting everything to FedEx.
Yeah, not much more to add on that. Basically, amazingly, all the seaplanes and the weather gods shined upon us, and it was fantastic. But down in Juneau, there's a cutoff to get into the FedEx first, is what it's called. You have to get that to the FedEx office by 10:30. Right, and there's a certain amount of time it takes to offload from a seaplane to get the freight, and then to get from freight over to the FedEx building. Gretchen was down there in Juneau. She was our lab runner all summer long. Really fantastic to have that, so we didn't have to scramble to figure out how to get these coolers from, coming off of seaplanes like 30 minutes before that holding time is about to pop. Like, it was a lot of close calls all summer. We did 16 attempts. We collected samples 16 times, and 14 of those got to the lab on time. So we did lose 2 of them, but really all in all, considering the summer that we had and a lot of flight cancellations, it really wasn't that bad at all. So yeah, this was an interesting day. This day was definitely earlier than I've ever been out there sampling. These champs right here, they just soldiered right on through. They woke up on time, and we all got out there. And also, big thanks to seaplanes. It's not their priority to get our packages within a holding time, but they went out of their way for us to make sure that, everybody was communicating with one another. And, there were some flubs, but, we soldiered through, and we got 14 samples to the lab. So I think that is just outstanding. So now it's time finally to get to what we're all waiting to hear. And I'm happy to report that we are looking pretty good here in Skagway.
Gretchen is signaling it.
Oh,
I just had to add to that. We had 10 minutes. By the time we got those coolers off of seaplane and got them to FedEx, it was 10 minutes. I was like scrambling through, and it was pretty exciting.
full contact sampling, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, with the results, we're really, really happy. We didn't want to see any exceedances, of course, but the information's important so that we all have that knowledge, right? It's good to arm yourself with knowledge so that you can make decisions for yourself on how much exposure you want to have. And let's just take a look first of all. Oh boy, torture device, good old graphs. I'll explain the graph a little bit here on the x-axis, the upright here. This is most probable number. So that's kind of the same thing as a colony forming unit, but we report it differently with enterococci. Oh, and it looks like the Zoom thing is covering up the label for the graph. But this is enterococci for contact recreation. So we've got our colonies on the upright, and then we've got our dates here. And then this is our limit. This is that criteria that we're comparing it to. So at 130 NPNs, we did great. We did fantastic. And you notice there's not a lot of data points on there, right? And the reason for that is because a lot of our samples for enterococci came back under the detection limit. So essentially, you can't really call it zero, but it's so low that they can't quantify it, right? So that's looking great. That's fantastic for contact recreation. It's a little bit of a different story when it comes to the fecal coliform when we're looking at the harvesting limits, right? So here again, is there colony forming units on the upright, dates over here. Each of the beaches is represented. We've got them color coded there, and you can see where the dots are. And then here's that criterion that we're comparing it to. You'll notice we do have two beaches that exceeded on two different occasions. Right, we've got Small Boat Harbor and we've got Naku Bay. Naku Bay surprisingly was the hottest, and it was really early on in the season up there. I think it was just around 180 CFUs. Really kind of unexpected compared to all the other results that we found. And then these other, a couple of pops here at the Small Boat Harbor, and then another one at Naku down at the end. And my understanding is that these aren't too much to be like, we shouldn't be like, oh my God, we got to change something at this point, right? It's not incredibly alarming, especially considering we have that wastewater mixing zone where the effluent is allowed to be higher and numbers are allowed to be higher within that larger radius. But we did have a couple of days where, it might not have been the best idea to go out there and eat an oyster if we had them, or a mussel. So that's definitely something that I'm interested to see what next year will look like. Would you say, everybody who's here, would you say this was a normal summer in terms of rain, or would you say it was a little drier than normal?
Seemed drier.
Seemed drier to me too, and I haven't actually looked at the data. But what they found, at least in Ketchikan, they had a great graphic when Ketchikan did their beach program that it shows superimposed over these results. They showed precipitation, and you would see in these spikes, you would see that the precipitation went way up, and that makes sense, right? You've got water falling on the watershed, and that's bringing lots of stuff down into that marine zone. So I'm wondering if maybe we would see different numbers. This is of course speculation, but next year will be an interesting study to see how it compares and whether or not we have more precip, whether or not we have higher turbidity. The rivers, the Taya seemed like it was pumping out normal, but the Skagway River was way low. Its gauge stage was the lowest I've seen since I've been here. And we really didn't see a whole lot of stuff coming out of there. And that's going to be influencing the amount of bacteria as well. Let's look at that geo mean. This is going to be combining the two. So again, we've got the CFUs / NPNs on the upright. And then on the bottom, we've got each site broken down and color coded. The blue is going to be the enterococci with its associated limit for geo mean. And then the orange is going to be that fecal coliform with its associated limit. And as you can see, no geo mean exceedances. This is really, really good news. I'm personally just very happy to see that we didn't have the problems that like Ketchikan has some bacteria problems, right? And we're not experiencing that here in Skagway, which is really just fantastic. Microbial source tracking. This is just the coolest technology, the coolest way to analyze things and use science in order to tell a story. We use a similar method when we're counting our Eulicon, our hooligan numbers, right? We're going out there and we're doing qPCR on water samples so that we can help to quantify that run. But a lot of times what they're using environmental DNA for is it's a binary thing, right? Is it present? Is it not? And that's kind of more what we're looking at Here, we're not necessarily quantifying, but we're looking to see who's there, who's pooping where, right? So I came up with some fun little icons to show you. We looked for three things. We were looking at dog, avian, which would be any type of like waterfowl or seabirds, and then human. And so what we found, we didn't see any markers at Naku Bay, which was somewhat surprising to me, but nonetheless, we saw avian markers at Smuggler's Cove, Yakutania West, and Airport Beach. And then we saw human markers at Smuggler's Cove and the Small Boat Harbor. So that's who's pooping out there as far as our analysis this year went. And again, it'll be interesting next year to do this analysis again and see if anything has changed, see if there are any markers that are different from this year. And so that's gonna be what we do next year. We're gonna be doing the same thing again. We're gonna be looking at probably the same exact 5 beaches. We might discuss changing that airport beach, not because we don't like waves and wind, but because the Skagway River actually branched off and took a big left turn. So whereas it used to be this wonderful, beautiful, just like perfect straight, you could just walk right out from the airport all the way out to the water's edge, right? Well, this year, the Skagway River split and we had to cross a probably 30-foot wide channel that was sometimes hip deep, right? And so that could be a problem. If the Skagway River had been really discharging like it normally does, I don't think we would have been able to sample that site. So we might go back to the drawing board and switch over to the other side of the river where it's more easily accessible. So, oh, what do people call that? Paradise Cove or,
Beach on by the.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we need to come up with a name for it, but that might be the place that we go next year. We'll figure that out. But we're gonna be doing the same round of sampling. We're gonna go from May until September. And we'll be doing microbial source tracking once again, and we'll keep the same communication plan in place. But let's talk about best management practices, right? How are we gonna continue to have this really good looking water on our beaches here in Skagway? Well, you can see we've got a pink salmon sitting on the shore here, right? Nobody put that there, that's a person. That was probably drugged there by an eagle or something. But if you're out there and you're fishing and maybe you're filleting on the beach and you're leaving some carcasses, don't just leave that on the beach because that'll cause birds to congregate and all want to swarm around. And as they're eating, they're gonna be, contributing. So cut up your catch into small little bits and pieces and throw it into the fast moving water of the Skagway River. Get that back out into the marine environment. Feed the seals, don't feed the birds, right? If you do catch fish, wash that fish in fresh water before you fillet it so that anything that's on the surface isn't going to get into your food and then cause some kind of illness, right? And cook it to at least 140 degrees Fahrenheit. That's going to help a lot. Pack out all your waste. If you go down to the beach and you bring a picnic bag with you, well, bring your garbage away with you. Try to avoid getting animals to go down there and congregate, munching on stuff, leaving stuff in the water, right? Don't discharge sewage from boats in harbors or near shore. If you own a boat, learn about marine sanitation and the devices and how to properly manage sewage on your boat. Keep you and your family healthy by washing your hands after contacting water and before eating and drinking, or if you go for a dip, wash off with fresh water. Warm, yes. And finally, of course, stay up to date with all the current water quality conditions by visiting the DEC beach webpage that we showed you. It's really, really full of great information. Get on that listserv if you want to. We can keep you guys all informed of what's happening. And that, I believe, brings us right on to the old end.
All right.
Anybody have any burning questions? Or Gretchen, do you have any did I miss anything?
You guys did awesome.
Hey.
Really, you covered it from start to finish. I think the only thing that I would add is, when we're talking about the mixing zone for the wastewater treatment facility, for cruise ships, they don't have a mixing zone. They have to meet the most stringent criteria of 31, when it discharges from their facility. Plus, they also have tertiary treatment facility. So whereas in Skagway, you have a primary one, they have 2 levels up. So it's unlikely and they really don't want to discharge in port, just the whole perception. So with all of that, just to give you like a little bit more good feeling, it's unlikely it's coming from cruise ships. So I just wanted to mention that. And then, and yes, you should definitely move that sampling location. Safety first. Safety first. My management would just like freak if they heard that you were going through that water. So.
Oh no, knee high is what I've been told, like moving water, no more than knee high. So we would always try to find a way across the channel where we could just use hip waders. So. Yeah,
okay, awesome.
Safety. I would never ask my crew to go across like super fast moving water. That's just not a good idea. Yeah. So yeah, we'll
cool.
maybe swapping that up next year.
Yeah, no, you did an excellent job, all three of you. We're very, very happy that you were able to get all of these samples on time. That was pretty remarkable. And even if some of them didn't meet the holding time, we're still going to use that data because it's still good data. You know, we're not throwing it out at all. Wonderful to see all of the low levels, non-detect or low levels. That's that's awesome. That's what we're hoping to see, but we just want to check.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah.
Well, guys have any questions?
Yeah, so, with not any questions, and I'm rambling, but, so this is first year for Skagway,
Yes.
and then, so this is like the baseline year. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that's baseline public. I mean, the city, goes out and tests, and I would have to look at the frequency on it, but they are doing tests, but those numbers I think would only become public if there were exceedances. So this is kind of us giving a full run of data so that people can see the numbers that are coming back, and we can, like, we have this outreach so that we can explain what those numbers mean so that we can see, yes, we do have this wonderful pristine water. So yes, this could be considered baseline, and then we'll go on and we'll do a second set next year, and we'll just continue to see how we're doing.
So you said when we have lots of rain, it's worse in the Skagway area. Potentially from all the residences in different sewage places. But what about over in Nakube or Dai where there aren't so many people?
Great, that's a good question. There is a correlation, I believe, between bacteria and the soil. And so as rain comes and washes through a watershed, it's eroding ever so slightly, and it's bringing that dirt and the associated bacteria with it and putting it into the marine system. There wouldn't be as much, it seems, in Naku Bay because it's well vegetated, so there's a lot of filtration that's happening. There's infiltration, and there's also the waters being stopped and letting that sediment come out. But it does go into Matthews Creek at certain points. Again, I haven't seen the actual septic system map. I know that kind of up on the east side, or like I said, it'd be the west side, where Dai Road goes up and tees off into Naku Road. There's some houses that are along kind of that southern portion of that could be contributing, and with a stiff south wind, you know, that surface water can get piled up on the beach. So you might see some stuff coming there. I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff come up in Naku Bay in all the years that we've been doing the HAB sampling, looking for harmful algal bloom evidence. We see stuff get pushed up the inlet towards us. We see a lot of plastic garbage, disproportionate to the amount of people that are here in Skagway. So we're probably seeing some Haines stuff coming up here. And fresh water is going to float on top of salt water, right? And the wind's going to push that whole mass up. So I think we could be seeing things that are potentially outside of actual Naku Bay that could be floating up there, but it's hard to say. That's all speculation on my part.
Well, I can tell you a bit about the decade of the 1970s because I was gardening out at my homestead. And I had to haul water for my fruit trees and everything in a little pickup truck. And I had a 6 foot deep well dug, catch rainwater. And just about every single year of those years, there was no rain measurably between April and September.
Wow.
Because my truck would carry 23 buckets, 5-gallon buckets, and I had to fill them every week and take them
Oh, my
out there.
goodness.
If there had been any rain, I would know.
Yeah,
And my well would dry up by the first week in June, every year. It would be dry, like that. And we didn't know that you could eat mussels year round. We never ate them in the summertime.
mhm.
Apparently that's not so, but we just never did. And there were huge snails all over the Long Bay. So anything else you'd like to know, I'm happy to visit with you sometime.
I'm so gonna hit
But
you up
this
and have, yeah.
rain, to me, is so unusual in the summer. I mean,
Yeah.
July and it's pouring down rain instead of just little, oh, I might mist your hair a little.
Right, yeah,
You know, it's just unreal to me.
yeah.
So, okay. Nice job. I'm so glad to see this happening.
No, yeah, we're happy to be participating in this. I think it's important information and I mean, you couldn't have better results if you asked for it, right?
Great. Was there something similar done with air quality? And I missed it.
Oh, no, we haven't done the air quality outreach yet. That will be closer to probably December is when we're gonna do that. We're gonna do our Ulicon outreach next. That should be in a couple of weeks. We just got results back from the lab. We were really excited to see how that turns out. And then I have to work on 4 years of analysis on this massive data set that we've collected. So that's gonna take me a little bit of time. So probably
4 years.
December. Yeah, it's taken me 4 years to write this report. Yeah. But yeah, you haven't missed it yet.
They're happy about the ships reducing effluent, but every ship brings a lot of people that are in town using the city facilities. So are you guys finding a correlation with the traffic or not? Or is it too early, or is that too early to tell?
Yeah, we would need to be doing testing prior to May, prior to that influx of people to be able to compare it, you know, one way or the other. It might be interesting because I think the city is testing throughout the year. They test more in the summertime, but they do test in the winter months. So it would be great to be able to compare data with the
Somewhere
city.
along the line, you probably will, yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully we can make that a reality.
That's an excellent question. Really good insight there. And that does happen. You know, the people come in and they use the facilities and it does affect the different communities throughout the Southeast.
Yeah.
Very much.
We've definitely, well, I've experienced, I live down on Second and I can smell the facility more in the summertime than I can in the winter. And I don't know if that has to do more with the volume or temperature, but I would imagine volume is probably a big
Gosh,
influence.
it must be considerable when you think we have about 600 people in the winter
Mhm.
and then 10,000
A day, yeah.
in the summer. There's gotta be a kind of a, seems like there'd be a noticeable.
Mhm.
And I suspect there's a lot more up around Lower Lake than people realize. I don't think all those legitimate campers are making sure they use the outhouses.
Yeah, there have been some sad stories on social media this summer, just even around town, people not properly using the facilities. It's unfortunate, but maybe that's something we can add to that. Don't we do like a big outreach in May when all the seasonals show up and we say, this is how you use the post office and this is where you take your garbage and
That's a really
don't
good
poop in the
idea.
woods.
We really need to do more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I would love to work with the, is it the visitor center that puts that on? Is that SDC? Yeah, it would be great to work with SDC to talk about, you know, the best management practices that we talked about on the last slide. You know, talking to people about how can you be a more responsible beachgoer when you're here in Skagway?
That's splendid. Put that on the agenda.
Yeah, Yeah, I'll talk to John about that.
Jacob,
Yeah, Jacob Watson, yeah, he just started up.
One to be enrolled
in
the next year.
Cool. All right.
Thanks, guys.
So, yeah,
Thanks a lot.
thanks for showing up to this awesome outreach, and thanks Gretchen for taking time out of your evening, your Friday evening to hang out with us in Skagway, and
You guys have been a pleasure to work with. So professional, really know what you're doing. Work so incredibly hard, really. One of the best grantees I've ever had. So
Oh,
thank you.
okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Awesome.
Right.
All right, well, everybody have a good evening, and we'll see you next time.
Sure, I'm on your mailing list. Thank you, you do an excellent job.